My wife got half of my business and laughed, "You'll be bankrupt in a year." 6 months later, her lawyer was calling her desperately because I had left her with an empty shell. Last night, at 2 a.m., I found myself sharing my own mess on Reddit. I never thought I'd be posting my personal problems online, but insomnia beat me, just like those clients who evade their invoices. And here I am. I'm 37, a man who built an exterior architecture and garden design business practically from the ground up with nothing but dirt and stubborn determination. 12 years ago, after graduating in horticulture and landscape design, right in the middle of the housing market crash, my Uncle George, a prestigious garden designer who had worked on luxury properties, took pity on me. "Gardens are in no hurry," he used to say while teaching me to prune Japanese maples without damaging them. His advice gave me confidence. I could wait for the economy to recover, so I worked endless hours under the sun. My first office was reduced to a corner of my parents' garage, where they set up an old drafting table that George gave me. There, I sketched my first plans. My first clients were neighbors who felt sorry for my situation, and then friends of those neighbors who were truly convinced by my style. For 3 years, I barely earned enough to cover the cost of materials and a few bowls of ramen. I reinvested every cent into sturdier tools, reference books, and finally, a second-hand pickup truck with my logo hand-painted on the tailgate, totally improvised. By the 5th year, I had rented a small space above a gardening supply store and hired a part-time assistant. My income allowed me to move out of my parents' home into a modest apartment. My proposal, natural, sustainable gardens that seemed to emerge from the environment rather than be imposed upon it, began to stand out in the area. It was at a local home and garden show where I met Chloe. I barely had the budget for the most discreet booth, the one tucked away in the most forgotten corner where I hung my photos, printed at a neighborhood cafe and held up with thumbtacks on worn panels. Amidst the polished stands of renowned companies, my space looked like a school project. She stopped, examined my designs carefully, and commented, "You have something the others don't. They have soul." Her presence, with a perfect bob haircut and a discreet but expensive outfit, caught my attention. Chloe worked for a high-level architecture firm, but felt constrained by the corporate routine and the bland designs the company imposed. What started as a brief exchange at the stand turned into a coffee after the fair closed, and then a dinner so long that the restaurant staff began clearing tables nearby. She talked about integrating 3D visualization technology into landscape projects. I talked about plants and their care. Together, we scribbled ideas on napkins, my garden sketches and her digital blueprints to show clients an immersive preview. "Your business needs someone to help clients visualize your creativity," she said, her eyes shining. 2 weeks later, we were presenting our first joint proposal. 6 months later, we were dating. A year later, Chloe moved her visualization team into my small studio, and 7 years ago, when we married, we formalized our partnership. Her digital skill complemented my horticultural expertise. The first 5 years of Green Vision flourished. Chloe transformed my workshop from a handful of dirt into a landscape boutique, offering immersive virtual tours. She took my hand-drawn designs and converted them into 3D experiences that clients could walk through before the first seed was planted. Our website, which started as a generic WordPress template, won a local award. We created professional social media accounts and shared every project from concept to realization. By the 3rd year, Green Vision was recognized in the region for its innovative spaces, merging classic gardening with a modern sensibility. With confidence, I took risks, designing a custom stone Japanese dry garden, a rooftop ecosystem for a restaurant, and a therapeutic garden for a children's hospital with sensory elements for children with different abilities. Thanks to those visualizations, our proposal closing rate rose from 40% to almost 80%. The business grew enough to open our own studio downtown, a modest, public-facing location with our name on the facade. We hired 2 young designers, George, named in honor of my uncle, and Sarah, both recent graduates with notable raw talent but lacking the experience of large firms. In them, I saw the potential George saw in me. For a time, everything seemed perfect. I handled the design and field work. Chloe handled the presentation technology, and the parts of the business that gave me hives. I enjoyed creating those living spaces. She enjoyed making it easy for others to understand them before seeing the first sprout. I signed the client acquisition contracts and fully entrusted her with the digital side, which I barely understood. We bought a small house with a large yard, and I transformed it into a living showcase of sustainable gardens. We weren't rich, but we had enough to afford a few getaways, invest in quality tools, and not panic when a client was late with a payment. I remember during our 5th anniversary dinner, I thought about that small, perfectly designed garden. This is success, I told myself, unaware that I was actually contemplating the beginning of the end. I admired the view from the top of a gentle rock slope, oblivious to the change of season that was barely perceptible. I watched as the leaves began to yellow before anyone recognized the arrival of autumn, a detail that inspired me to research new techniques and refine my designs. What we once considered charming and authentic slowly became narrow and limited for her. Chloe began to compare our income to that of her former corporate architecture colleagues, the ones who worked in glass skyscrapers downtown and enjoyed annual bonuses. Jessica was just promoted to director of visualization, she dropped one night, scrolling on her phone while I was tracing blueprints on the table. They're sending her to Tokyo to present their new VR platform. Comments like that became commonplace. Suddenly, our steady income seemed merely middle class, as if we were one Amazon order away from bankruptcy. My local business, born from scratch, had become too small. "If you're not global, you don't exist," she reproached. The designs she once called moving and unique were now cute but amateur. Then came the direct hits. You could be earning 6 figures if you weren't stuck in the hobbit habitat of garden gnomes. I had accepted commissions that demanded my creativity and physical stamina to improve the profit margin, but nothing seemed to please her. The same woman who once admired my passion now spoke of playing with plants like a child with a pot. Those words cut deep because they came from the one who had promised unconditional support. One night, after an especially cutting remark about how old-fashioned our business model was, I tried to understand. "I thought you were excited about what we built together." Her voice oozed fatigue, that new expression she wore like a stigma. "I was, Ethan, but I'm 40 years old. Do you really want to keep designing gardens for housewives and local restaurants? Don't you want to grow? Have an exit strategy?" She wasn't just attacking my company, she was questioning my identity. I didn't see my work as a hobby, but as my legacy. Every square meter of lawn, every stone path, and the nights spent sketching with dirt under my fingernails. I defended myself. Our clients love what we do, and we live decently from it. "And where's the real impact? The growth potential?" she repeated. I felt bewildered. This wasn't a startup. It was our life's work. But she saw it as a stepping stone. The disconnect became apparent 6 years after we married when we secured our biggest client, a luxury condo developer downtown. They wanted exceptional landscaping on terraces, patios, and green walls. The budget was generous, the commission creative, and the visibility enormous. I immersed myself in concepts of sustainable urbanism, green roofs, and living walls. Chloe, revitalized, created astonishing visualizations, learned new software, and we worked side by side, like in the old days. But the dynamic changed. She began to say that she should handle all the meetings alone, that "I don't connect when you talk about technical aspects." She came home with words like vision, scale, and big opportunities. When I asked for concrete data to integrate into my designs, she simply shrugged. "We're still defining the global panorama." I tried to ignore the shadow looming over our relationship and focus on perfecting the project until one night I overheard a call in her office. "Your offer is tempting, but my current situation complicates things," she said, unaware I was listening. "I need some time to sort it out." At that moment, everything clicked. Later, searching for tax papers in our studio, I found a separate bank account with almost $25,000. Legally, it wasn't illicit under communal property laws, but the secrecy was suspicious. When I confronted her, she didn't blink or hesitate. Her gaze, devoid of remorse, confirmed what I already knew. Not only was she leaving me, she was trying to erase everything that defined me in one fell swoop. She looked at me with that air of superiority, as if I were a clueless intern, and commented from her chair, "That's your contingency fund." I asked incredulously, "Contingency for what?" She shrugged and said naturally, "For when your little gardening business collapses. Let's be real, family businesses don't thrive nowadays." Her tone lacked all compassion. It left me stunned. That business was also my project. I thought it was ours. I let out a sigh and watched her close her laptop as if I were stealing productive minutes from her. "Ethan, be realistic," she continued. "Your passion for landscaping is fine, and yes, I helped get it off the ground, but this isn't a large-scale growth opportunity or something scalable. There's a limit." I was speechless for a few moments, wondering what kind of conversation she'd been having with the developer. I asked her to tell me about the offer they had been discussing. Her face froze, and for an instant, I saw something flash. Guilt, a spark of annoyance hard to describe, but it was there. Then, she let it out. She believes she can go beyond the garden. I stared at her and said in a strained voice, "Are you going to leave the business?" She didn't deny it. She confirmed it. She remained silent. That pause was her answer. Neither surprise nor regret, just an emptiness that reproached me with facts. I understood the deception. It wasn't just the betrayal, but how blind I had been to trust her. It was as if she had already moved on, and I was left waiting for an ending she had written without telling me. I took a deep breath and spoke clearly. "This marriage is over, and I will rebuild the business without this baggage." I didn't yell, I didn't demand explanations, I simply understood that arguing was futile. When someone shows you who they are, don't insist on arguing, just walk away. That night, I slept in my workshop, surrounded by sketches and plant samples. 2 days later, Chloe told me she wanted a divorce. She didn't try to save anything or mention therapy. She simply asserted that she had outgrown my limited vision and was seeking goals commensurate with her ambitions. I felt devastated and uprooted. It took some time to piece things together through conversations in the industry. The client wasn't just looking for landscaping. They were setting up an entire environmental visualization and design division, a much bigger stage. And of course, they offered Chloe a star position. Suddenly, everything clicked. But the most toxic part was yet to come. My former partner demanded half, not just of the marital assets, but of my company, everything I had planted and cared for before she appeared. The negotiations were brutal. Her lawyer entered with impeccable briefcases, presenting Chloe as the visionary who had turned my craft into a real business. I objected that I was the one who had cultivated client relationships, who understood the plants and the land. Her response was cold. "Without her visualization material, your designs would still be scribbles on graph paper." My lawyer, a generalist in inheritances and real estate, couldn't match the rigor of that corporate jurist. With my modest income, I couldn't afford a high-level firm. The judge bought their argument. I was left with the house and half my savings, but only 50% of the company I had built from the ground up. When I received the terms, I felt my soul leave the room. Chloe gave me a disdainful smile as she signed the documents. "In a year, you'll be ruined. Without my technical skills, no one will want your nice garden drawings," she let out, laughing. Even her lawyer chuckled. I nodded calmly, pretending to be defeated, a wilted sprout in a corner. I spent 3 days immersed in despair, ready to disappear from the landscaping world, move to the countryside, and pot plants in a nursery as if my dream had never existed. But I remembered a piece of advice from my Uncle George. After a drought that destroyed our plantings, he said, "Gardens don't die that easily. They are made to be reborn." That's how my blister therapy began. While Chloe was celebrating with her brand new division and a $2,000 coffee machine, I was hauling pavers in the rain with a wheelbarrow and nothing else. There were no interns or expensive equipment, just me on a muddy plot, meeting deadlines. There was no time for lamentations. There were retaining walls to build and clients who hadn't let me down. What Chloe had forgotten is that she mastered visualization. But I know the essence of creation and my clients as real people, not just digital models. The day after the signing, I withdrew my share of the money after consulting my lawyer, ensuring I took only what was legally mine. Then I called George and Sarah, the two designers I had mentored, and invited them for coffee away from our usual spot. I laid out the situation. We start from scratch. New company, new headquarters, same design philosophy. I explained that the payroll would be tight at first, but I would offer profit sharing once everything stabilized. I expected doubts or polite excuses. Instead, Sarah instantly asked, "When do we start?" George nodded without hesitation. "And regarding the non-compete clauses?" George inquired. I replied, "They only apply to Green Vision, which is now split with someone who isn't running it. They don't prevent us from forming a new project." Immediately afterward, I contacted the landlord to renegotiate the studio. I told him about the divorce, and to my surprise, he showed understanding. His sister had gone through something similar. He agreed to terminate the contract early in exchange for me redesigning his garden. That night my phone blew up with messages. What happened to the company account? Where are the design files in our projects? I didn't answer. I watched as the chats piled up like dry leaves in winter. I left them in panic. The next morning, I filed the documentation for the new partnership, George Legacy Gardens, in honor of my uncle, who taught me everything. I moved into a renovated, smaller and cozier garage. I used my equipment as collateral for a loan and got to work. The funny thing is that the old company still existed. Technically, Chloe still had 50% of an empty shell. The premises were deserted, the staff had left, the website had crashed, and the clients were gone because my name was behind the business. In less than a week, I personally spoke with all clients with pending projects. I explained that we were restructuring and that I would continue to lead the projects. I expected renegotiations, but none backed down. On the contrary, many sided with me. I vaguely mentioned my marital problems, and suddenly my story resonated with their own separation stories. Mrs. Winchester, a legendary client, told me, "I always thought your flowers weren't meant to deceive. I love working nonstop, but this time everything has a new meaning." I admitted that the studio was smaller, but also that expenses had dropped and now she was receiving more direct attention. George and Sarah accepted a temporary pay cut in exchange for future participation, proof that loyalty cannot be bought. We recovered the essentials, hand sketches, and simple digital representations. Sarah learned on the fly with affordable software. Clients celebrated the change. They said the handmade approach felt authentic. Income dropped a bit initially, but so did costs, so the balance remained stable. Without the pressure to grow or chase figures, I remembered my original motive: to create something real, lasting, and meaningful. No corporate jargon, no embellishments, just roots and honest work. Then Chloe's lawyer called, furious that my investment in the old business was not yielding fruit. He demanded the return of assets and threatened legal action. My new lawyer, specialized in SMEs, explained that I hadn't violated any agreement. The old business was still alive, and she only owned a share of that shell. Nothing prevented me from starting my own project. He demanded that I remain tied to our joint partnership. Her lawyer called me, terrified, insisting that she depended on that regular income. While she had moved into a luxury apartment and rented an excessively expensive German car, her checks never arrived. Nothing but empty promises. The most delicious irony. Some of our former clients have asked about landscaping projects, and as they have no other alternative, it drifts directly to me. I'm not seeking revenge. My goal was always to create beautiful spaces and earn a living doing it. Still, I must confess a certain satisfaction in seeing the business she discarded for playing with plants flourish, while her contingency fund is completely drying up. One day, unannounced, she showed up alone at my new studio. She caught me finishing some sketches, and by a miracle, I didn't smear the paper when I was startled. She still wore that designer elegance, but her confident smile had vanished. She was visibly stressed and nervous. She started by praising the space and instantly changed the subject. "We need to talk about the business," she said, without stopping to draw lines. I listened to her proposal to work together again because, according to her, we were a great team. I almost laughed. She didn't miss our old collaboration. Her branded handbag looked frayed, and the expensive jewelry she used to show off had disappeared as soon as I rejected her offer. Then she moved on to criticizing my company. My website seemed amateur to her. It had been designed by Sarah's son, a digital media student. My social media was irregular because I prefer the garden to the mobile, and my rates lacked sophistication based solely on time, materials, and common sense. She claimed that without her digital touch, I was losing money, that I could triple my income with the right strategy. I replied without raising my voice. I didn't build this to shine at conferences or chase followers on LinkedIn. Every project with my name behind it demonstrates something authentic, not a cold share calculation. This studio isn't in a glass tower with ambient lighting and display succulents. It has something those places will never have: real integrity. I don't need vision board mantras or designer idioms, but dirt roots and genuine respect that you don't get with a press release. I put the pencil down on the table, looked her in the eye, and explained my numbers. Today, I bring home more profit than when we married, with somewhat lower total revenue but reduced expenses to a minimum and much higher net earnings. Her face drew a grimace of disbelief. "Impossible," she exclaimed. "I detailed that this location costs half. The rent is a third of what we used to pay. There are no state-of-the-art 3D stations. No technological updates every 6 months, no expensive coffee machines that clients barely use. Just a studio where people see how their gardens are born from human hands." Her anger transformed into palpable vibration. She accused me of limiting my potential, which is curious coming from someone who thought every corner should have a QR code and lights for Instagram. Just then, Sarah came in with lunch. Chloe froze for a second and then shot me a look. "Do you want me to stay?" her silent interpolation asked. I nodded with a slight gesture. Chloe immediately caught the signal. Her eyes darted quickly between us and the door. Wordlessly, Sarah slid the plate onto the table. Then George, Sarah, and most of the present clients simply kept silent. Chloe scanned the room, the drawings pinned to the wall, the half-built model of a community garden, the whiteboard full of project notes. Everything screamed, "We are better off without you, aren't we?" Finally, I asked her, "Did you plan it?" But her face didn't change. I adapted. That's what real companies do when they leave behind a burden that was getting in the way. She left furiously, letting out a dramatic, "This isn't over." 3 days later, a letter arrived from her lawyer demanding the financial statements. Chloe alleged that my new company was profiting from the old one and claimed her fair share. "No, friend. New company, different name, own space, no obligations or access," my own lawyer, a legend, replied, with an impeccable text. Meanwhile, I was enjoying the best month since I became independent and opened this studio. I started my solo career, and soon the commissions kept coming. Satisfied clients recommended me to their acquaintances, and even a local sculptor I collaborated with managed to get us featured in an art publication. We stopped designing gardens for wealthy developers and started working with real people, people who valued space, tranquility, and connection. One day, I received a completely unexpected call from an old client, the rose garden woman who was convinced Chloe was too out of reach. It turns out her son ran the city's botanical gardens, and they were about to renovate the Japanese section. When I heard my name, I knew it was the project I had always dreamed of, a commission with purpose, capable of moving people. I prepared a simple proposal: hand sketches, a thoughtful design, and a few digital illustrations that Sarah created in an economical program. While we waited, 2 major rival companies presented their luxurious virtual landscapes, more like a video game than a real garden. However, we won the bid. The director called me to say, "Your design transmits the longing to inhabit the garden." Those words were etched in my memory, but Chloe still wasn't finished. 3 months after separating from her, I received a lawsuit. She accused me of voluntarily destroying our old company to defraud her. My lawyer, with a sigh, commented that it was a gesture of desperation. But it still involved time, depositions, and paperwork. During the interrogation, I was asked if I was already planning my exit when the divorce began. I replied, "No, I was planning my survival strategy." For Chloe, the company was merely a divisible asset. For me, it was the fruit of years of dedication that I had to protect. They tried to discredit me by calling George as a witness, but it was a mistake. Calmly, he explained that he left because Chloe treated designers like cogs, prioritizing profits over quality. Later, Sarah reaffirmed the same thing. Chloe insisted on prefabricated templates to scale the business, while we learned to listen to the land and the people. The big surprise came when one of our former clients appeared. Despite his bad knees, he arrived with a photo album and contained anger. He pointed at Chloe and recounted that she recommended ripping out his rose garden and installing artificial turf, a measure that went against the whole concept of caring for the earth. At that revelation, the defense asked for a recess. Upon returning, they offered to leave everything behind and buy my share of the company for $75,000. I could have presented myself as a victim, embittered by the betrayal, but I preferred to look at what I truly had: a project built on values, a team willing to back me up, and the dignity of knowing I wouldn't give up. I hired an accountant who valued the company at $0, the market price for a company without employees, clients, or a soul. Chloe accepted without hesitation, and at the same time, the visionary developer who had promised her a division head role disappeared when the corporation did not approve his plan. A week later, I was at a bank when I ran into her brother, someone I was never close with, but always sensible. He confessed that she had been appropriating other people's work for years, from school projects to professional collaborations. He also revealed that while he was accepting a managerial position in Boston, the real reason for his departure was my reputation. I nodded, without asking more. Today, I'm invited to mentor students and speak at landscaping exhibitions. It's funny how life works. Almost 12 months have passed, and we have 6 employees, 2 locations, and a group of clients with authentic missions. We have even been featured in specialized magazines and appeared on a podcast. I'm still surprised how I got here. Now I'm dating someone who draws plants by hand, just like me. We have coffee in my backyard and watch a Japanese maple that I planted from a cutting grow. Chloe said I would be ruined in a year. Instead, I possess something much more valuable: peace, purpose, and my own business. I discovered that success doesn't always shine with polished facades. Sometimes it is born in hands full of dirt, in the loyalty of a faithful team, and in the aroma of freshly turned soil. And frankly, that is worth more than any shiny package. I almost died in the hospital, and my wife didn't care. As soon as I was discharged, I packed my bags and left. She laughed, thinking she had won. 2 years later, she was turning her phone upside down, begging for another chance. I woke up at 2:47 a.m. in a hospital room, my throat burning, and my breathing chained to a broken beeping sound. 3 feet away from me, Jessica, my wife of 6 years, was scrolling through TikTok as if that blue glow were more urgent than my attempts to stay alive. But let's go back. It all started with a bland fatigue, muscle aches without exercise, a sticky yawn that wouldn't go away with coffee. When I suggested I should probably go to the doctor, Jessica let out a nasal laugh. "You always exaggerate when work gets tough," she said without looking up from her phone. I kept functioning out of stubbornness. Then came the fever of broken glass. Every joint felt filled with shards. The sheets woke up soaked, and I trembled so hard I bit my tongue. Her advice was, "Take a couple of Tylenol and stop waking me up." That night, everything changed. When I opened my eyes, the bedroom was spinning. My right arm was dead weight, and my heart was pounding so hard my fillings vibrated. "Go mumble somewhere else," she groaned, turning over and letting out the phrase that still buzzed hours later. "I am not your nanny. Deal with it." With numb fingers, I dialed Laura. My older sister lives 45 minutes away, but she arrived in 20. Her face hardened when she saw me, and without raising her voice, she announced, "We're going to the emergency room." Jessica didn't even flinch. If you want to validate your little act, go ahead. The emergency room was a whirlwind of gowns and medical terms. Septic shock, multi-organ failure, temperature 104 degrees, blood pressure dropping rapidly. When the doctor asked how long I had been like this, I described the weeks. He looked at Jessica, who was still scrolling through Instagram like someone waiting for their turn at a bank. I was admitted instantly. Laura stayed until security forced her to leave. She promised to return at dawn. Jessica was suggested to stay that first night. She frowned. I have a meeting first thing in the morning. He's in good hands here. And she left. Thus began a parade of antibiotic bags, endless analyses, and feverish delusions. Laura appeared every afternoon with clean clothes, her laptop, and lucid questions for the specialists. Jessica came twice. The first time, 15 minutes. She complained about the expensive parking, the second time with a coffee that grew cold while she narrated party gossip. When I asked her for help drinking water, the infection had left me weak. She repeated bitingly, "I am not your nanny. Deal with it." The nurse who entered afterward held the glass for me with infinite patience. That's when I understood. That stranger showed more pity than the woman I had married. I spent 10 days behind those white walls. Laura read me pages of a novel between CT scans and supported my arm the first times I walked. Co-workers sent cards. Even the catering lady brought me extra Jell-O. Jessica, on the other hand, came only one more time. She canceled our vacation. Obviously, you won't be up to it, and complained about having to run the house by herself. She never asked about my prognosis. On the day of my discharge, she didn't show up. A message informed me she was overwhelmed and that Laura could handle it. During the ride home, my sister checked the rearview mirror, trying to decipher if I was about to break down crying. I didn't. But that same night, while Jessica laughed at a series, I struggled with my trembling fingers to twist open a bottle of water. There, in silence, my decision was sealed. At dawn, Jessica prepared avocado toast for her Instagram. She pointed me toward the frozen bread. I texted Laura, "Help me get out." With the precision of a surgical heist, we emptied the house. Documents, clothes, laptop, medications. I secured a small apartment with an elevator, climbing stairs was still a feat, and changed the direct deposit for my accounts. Jessica noticed nothing. She was planning a trip with friends. "You'll be fine alone, right?" she asked without looking up from her laptop. I nodded and added, "Cancel joint card to my mental list." The small stabs hurt more than the box movements, the discharge papers thrown in the trash, her dramatic sigh when I asked her to pick up a prescription, the complaint because I messed up the laundry by sleeping halfway through the day. Every detail rusted what was left of the ring. I waited for her to go to work. I left the keys and a concise letter. There were no fiery reproaches, just the chronology of a sepsis and the realization that I was no longer there. I blocked numbers, cut off shared location, and left. That night, sitting in a borrowed armchair, I tasted overly soyed Chinese food. It tasted like freedom. Laura's phone began to flicker. "Very funny. You'll be back in a week," Jessica wrote. Minutes later, "You're being ridiculous. You can't just leave because I didn't care for you enough. You'll regret this tantrum." An hour later, "You're embarrassing everyone. Everyone knows you're just seeking attention." As she built a narrative of an unstable husband, I was scrolling through Amazon for shower curtains and organizing my first therapy session. My therapist gave me a screeching clarity. Being accompanied and feeling accompanied are different things. In that room, you were alone. 2 weeks later, my apartment is minimal but quiet. The elderly couple next door left me chicken soup. I cried over the first spoonful more than I cried when I signed my marriage certificate. I can already climb a flight of stairs without choking. I cooked pasta, and it tasted like triumph. The dominant feeling is relief. There are no broken eggshells under my feet, no hurtful comments waiting to emerge from the wrong mouth. Jessica intensifies the contact attempts, alternating sobs with veiled threats, posting stories about supporting your partner in their mental struggles, but every message confirms I chose correctly. Next week, I'll see a lawyer. I have the hospital records and screenshots where she admits ignoring my symptoms. I'm not looking for a war, just an exit. Today, an SMS arrived from an unknown number. You always come back. Who will put up with your drama? I smiled. I opened the window. I breathed. For the first time in years, the air didn't smell of resignation. I deactivated the number. I prepared breakfast, and for the first time in months, my hands didn't tremble when holding the coffee cup. A year ago, just hearing that laugh, that sharp, forced chuckle that always announced reproaches, would make my stomach clench. Last week, I heard it again, echoing through the supermarket aisles as I looked for a new roast. I didn't even flinch. I squeezed the bag of beans, paid, and left. Jessica didn't even see me. Update. Many have asked about my life after the collapse of my ex-wife's social media, so here it is. The divorce was settled 6 months ago. Jessica didn't contest it because she was too busy selling the online image of the compassionate wife supporting the unstable husband. The day we signed, she released a tearful text on Instagram, black and white photo included, narrating how difficult it is to love someone else's demons. I left her to her theater. Those who needed to know the truth already knew it. Sepsis doesn't disappear upon discharge. It leaves stubborn sequelae, fatigue, joint pain, brain fog, which feel milder when no one is telling you that you're exaggerating. I started physical therapy, I joined a survivors group and regained strength. That's where I met Maya. We bumped into each other at the center door. She dropped her water bottle, and we both bent down. She was coming for grief counseling. Her husband had died from a sudden infection 2 years earlier. We weren't looking for romance, just company that understood how weird it is to be asked when you'll be all cured. We shared articles about post-sepsis syndrome and book recommendations. We went from coffees to walks, from walks to telling jokes about the inappropriate questions a survivor receives. While I was healing, Jessica's castle of selfies began to crack. Mutual friends wrote to me, suspicious. The medical reports didn't match the version of a mental collapse she was selling, nor the messages she had sent me when I was burning with a 104-degree ER fever. The breaking point came when she claimed to have taken leave to care for me, even though she was actually spending a spa weekend with her new boyfriend. The boyfriend, curious, asked me for the truth. I sent him my clinical records and wished him luck. It didn't last long. That's where Laura came in. She helped me record every conversation after I left the hospital. It was her idea to record Jessica's attacks just in case. If it weren't for her, I might still doubt my own memory. At work, I was promoted to a more strategic and less physical position. My team celebrated with cupcakes. Maya surprised me with dinner at my favorite restaurant. It wasn't a date, or it didn't start as one, but seeing her laugh at her failed attempt to make soup stirred something I thought was atrophied. Jessica appeared at my office reception, haggard and with old photos in her hand, perhaps to evoke happier times. I alerted security and left through the back door. My therapist wrote to me, "It's okay not to feel anything. Sometimes that's healthier than feeling too much." He was right. My biggest concern was getting to coffee with Maya on time. In time, Maya and I became inseparable. As we were making dinner one night, I took out the ring I had kept in a drawer, and without speeches or cameras, I proposed. She said yes, her hands covered in flour. Only family and close friends knew. Somehow Jessica found out, and the messages started again. "You can't be serious. She's a rebound. Let's talk before you make a mistake." I blocked one number after another, but they kept reappearing. Then came the summons. Jessica was suing me for defamation. She claimed my testimonies stained her honor and demanded an obscene sum for damages. When I opened the envelope, I felt no fear, just a strange serenity. Finally, everything would be recorded before a judge. The hearing was set for last month. Maya, Laura, and I put together a dossier so thick it needed a box. Hospital records, security camera footage showing Jessica appearing twice in 10 days, screenshots of her stories boasting about massages while I was intubated, audios where she called me a drama queen for having a 104-degree fever, and messages instructing family members to say he's unstable. On the appointed day, the room was overflowing with onlookers and health journalists. The lawsuit had piqued morbid curiosity. Jessica arrived impeccable, dressed in neutrality, with a clearly visible white scarf. I wore the same suit I used for my first job interview. It reminded me where I came from. Her lawyer started with a speech about the reputation of a selfless woman defamed by a vengeful ex-husband. When it was my turn, I handed over the box. The judge ordered the videos to be projected one by one. The room went from murmurs to an icy silence when Jessica was shown scrolling through TikTok while my vitals were crashing on the monitor screen. "Do you recognize the person on the mobile?" the judge asked. "It would appear to be me," she said, pale. What followed was a methodical demolition. A nurse testified that Jessica refused to sign the surgical consent because she had a flight to catch. The ex-boyfriend recounted how he saw her celebrating in a jacuzzi the same night I entered the ICU. Laura presented call records and Jessica's saved cloud playlist, titled Self-Care Weekend. At the third testimony, Jessica erupted, accusing the court of bias, me of manipulation, and Maya of being a carrion witch. The magistrate slammed the gavel. Her lawyer lowered his gaze. The sentence arrived in the same session. Lawsuit dismissed for lack of merit. Jessica was ordered to pay court costs and a symbolic compensation, at my suggestion, to the Firm Hands Foundation, the support program for abandoned patients during critical illnesses that we had incubated in the survivors group. The media captured the moment Jessica left the courtroom amidst flashes and questions. Her marketing agency rescinded her contract the next day. The brands that sponsored her deleted past collaborations. With the newspaper in hand, Maya whispered to me, "The best part is that you didn't lift a finger to destroy her. She destroyed herself." "And thanks to that," I replied, "now we can finance 20 more post-sepsis support kits." That same afternoon, we officially announced the foundation. The money from the court costs covered printing brochures with warning signs I had ignored and the creation of an emergency fund for real caregivers. Today, I wake up to my phone vibrating, messages from survivors who want to volunteer, anonymous donations, proposals from hospitals. Among the notifications is a final one from Maya, a link to a documentary about resilience after serious illnesses. I smile. We have a date to watch it tonight at home, without flashes or filters. The wedding will be in the spring, with no social media campaigns, no hashtags, no need to prove anything. The truth, when supported by evidence and defended with calm, is enough in itself.